The stagecoach hit another rut, and Lydia Rowan's head knocked against the wooden frame hard enough to make her vision blur. She didn't complain, hadn't said a word in 3 hours, not since the last passenger, a circuit preacher with opinions about women traveling alone, finally got off in some nameless settlement 20 miles back. Now it was just her, the driver, and the dust. Through the small window, the landscape looked like God had given up halfway through creation. Flat, brown, endless. The kind of emptiness that made a person feel small, which was exactly what Lydia wanted. To be small, forgettable, safe. The letter was still folded in her pocket, worn soft from being read too many times. Miss Rowan, I'm not a man who writes well or often. I need a wife. You need a situation. If you can work hard and keep your business to yourself, we'll do fine. Stage arrives Tuesdays. Garrett Hale. No poetry. No promises. Not even a proper greeting. And yet, she'd written back the same day. The stagecoach lurched to a stop, and the driver's voice cut through the stillness. Caldwell Flats, ma'am. Lydia stood, smoothed her skirt, a futile gesture after 3 days of travel, and stepped down into a town that looked like it had been dropped there by accident. One main street, maybe 24 buildings, half of them leaning like they'd lost the will to stand up straight. A saloon, a dry goods store, a building with a cross on top that probably passed for a church. Everything coated in the same fine layer of dust that now covered her boots. And people, everywhere, watching. She hadn't expected a welcoming committee, but she also hadn't expected this. Dozens of faces turned toward her with the kind of attention usually reserved for carnival attractions or public hangings. A woman in a faded blue dress whispered something to the man beside her. 2 younger women, maybe sisters, stood in front of the dry goods store with their arms crossed. An older man with a sheriff's badge tilted his hat back and studied her like she was a puzzle he didn't particularly want to solve. Lydia's hands wanted to shake. She didn't let them. Instead, she scanned the crowd for a face that might belong to Garrett Hale. She had no idea what he looked like. The letter hadn't included a photograph, and she hadn't asked for one. Somehow, it had seemed safer not to know. Miss Rowan? The voice came from behind her, low and careful, like someone trying not to startle a skittish horse. She turned. The man standing there was tall, taller than she'd imagined, with shoulders that looked like they'd carried more than their share. His face was weathered in a way that made it hard to guess his age. Could have been 35. Could have been 50. Dark hair, longer than fashion probably allowed out here, and eyes that didn't quite meet hers. Not out of shyness, out of something else. He wore work clothes, clean but worn, and held his hat in both hands like he wasn't sure what else to do with them. Mr. Hale, she said. He nodded once. You came. It wasn't a question, more like a statement of fact that seemed to surprise him. I did, Lydia said. The crowd was still watching. She could feel their eyes like hands pressing against her back. Garrett looked at her for another moment, then at the small trunk the driver had set down beside the coach. This all? Yes. He picked it up like it weighed nothing and started walking, not toward the crowd, away from it, down the street toward a wagon hitched outside the livery. Lydia followed, keeping her chin up and her eyes forward. She'd learned a long time ago that if you acted like you belonged somewhere, sometimes people would believe it. Sometimes. The whispers started before she'd gone 10 steps. That's her? Doesn't look like much. Wonder what she's running from. He actually went through with it. Lord help him. Lydia kept walking. Garrett loaded the trunk into the wagon bed without comment, then offered his hand to help her up onto the seat. His palm was calloused, rough, warm. He let go the second she was settled. He climbed up beside her, took the reins, and clicked his tongue. The horses started forward. They were halfway out of town before he spoke again. You hungry? No, Lydia said. She was starving, but her stomach was too tight to hold anything down. Tired? A little. He nodded like that confirmed something. Ranch is about 5 miles. Not much to look at, but it's solid. House needs work. Always does. I can work, Lydia said. Good. Silence again, but it wasn't hostile, just empty, like he'd used up his quota of words for the day and didn't see the point in wasting more. Lydia watched the landscape roll by. More nothing. A few scrubby trees that looked like they were barely holding on. Hills in the distance that shimmered in the heat. "They don't want me here," she said finally. Garrett didn't look at her. "No." "Does that bother you?" "No." "Why not?" He was quiet for so long she thought he wasn't going to answer. Then, "Because they didn't want me here either. Still don't, most of them." Lydia turned to look at him. "Why?" His jaw tightened. "Long story. We've got 5 miles. Not today," he said, and his tone made it clear the subject was closed. Fine. She had her own long stories, her own closed subjects. The ranch appeared gradually, like it was trying to sneak up on them. First a fence line, then a barn, then a house. Low and sprawling, built from rough-cut lumber that had gone gray with age. Not pretty, but like he'd said, it looked solid. Garrett stopped the wagon near the porch and set the brake. He got down, grabbed her trunk, and carried it to the front door without waiting for her. Lydia climbed down on her own and followed him inside. The interior was exactly what she'd expected. Sparse, functional, clean, but in the way that said no one really cared about it beyond basic maintenance. A main room with a stone fireplace, a kitchen area with a pump and a cast iron stove. 2 doors, both closed, probably bedrooms. Garrett set the trunk down and finally looked at her properly. "You'll take the back room. I'm in the front. Washroom's out back. There's a well near the barn. Water's good." "All right," Lydia said. He shifted his weight, uncomfortable. I don't expect anything from you beyond what we agreed." It took her a moment to understand what he meant. When she did, heat crawled up her neck. "I understand. We'll marry in a week," he continued. "Gives you time to settle. Gives the town time to get used to the idea. Maybe." "And if they don't?" "Doesn't matter," Garrett said. "This is my land, my house, my decision." Something in the way he said it, flat, final, made Lydia believe him. "I'll start supper," she said, mostly because she needed something to do with her hands. "You don't have to." "I know," she said, "but I'm going to." He studied her for another moment, then nodded and walked back outside, leaving her alone in the house that was supposed to become hers. Lydia stood there for a full minute, listening to the silence. Then she unpacked. The first 2 days passed in a strange, careful dance. Garrett left before dawn and came back after dark, smelling like hay and sweat and horses. He ate whatever she put in front of him without comment, washed his plate, and disappeared into his room. He wasn't rude, just absent. Lydia kept herself busy. Scrubbed the floors, beat the dust out of the curtains, found mouse droppings in the pantry, and spent an afternoon setting traps and reorganizing the shelves. The work felt good, purposeful. It kept her mind from wandering back to places she'd decided not to go. On the 3rd morning, she woke early and found Garrett already in the kitchen, pouring coffee from a battered pot. "Morning," he said. "Morning." He hesitated, then poured a second cup and slid it across the table toward her. She took it. The coffee was strong enough to strip paint, but she drank it anyway. "I'm riding into town today," Garrett said. "Need supplies. You want to come?" Lydia considered. She didn't particularly want to face those stairs again, but she also couldn't hide on the ranch forever. "Yes," she said. He nodded. "We leave in an hour." Caldwell Flats looked exactly the same as it had 3 days ago. Same buildings, same dust, same people, standing in the same places, watching with the same expressions. Garrett pulled the wagon up in front of the dry goods store and set the brake. He got down, then waited while Lydia climbed down on her own. He didn't offer his hand this time. She wondered if that was intentional, a way of showing the town she wasn't fragile, or if he'd just forgotten. Inside, the store smelled like leather and pickles and old wood. A man behind the counter, middle-aged, balding, with a face like a dried apple, looked up when they entered. "Garrett," he said, neutral. "Henry," Garrett replied, equally neutral. Henry's eyes shifted to Lydia, lingered, then moved back to Garrett. "What can I do for you?" Garrett pulled a list from his pocket and set it on the counter. "Need these, and whatever she needs." Henry picked up the list, scanned it, nodded. "Take me about 10 minutes." "Fine." Garrett moved to the back of the store, toward the hardware section, leaving Lydia standing alone near the fabric bolts. She felt Henry watching her. "You settling in all right?" he asked. The question was polite. The tone wasn't. "Yes, thank you," Lydia said. "Long way from—" "Where was it you're from?" "Back east," Lydia said, deliberately vague. Big change coming out here." "Yes. Takes a certain kind of woman to marry a man she's never met." Lydia met his eyes. "I suppose it does." Henry smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Garrett's a good man. Quiet. Keeps to himself. Folks here respect that." "That's good to hear." Of course, they also wonder why a good man like that would need to send away for a wife. Plenty of decent women right here in Caldwell Flats. There it was. The real question. The real judgment. Lydia kept her voice level. "I couldn't say. You'd have to ask him." "Maybe I will." Before Lydia could respond, the door opened and two women walked in. The sisters she'd seen on her first day. Up close, they looked younger than she'd thought. Early 20s, maybe. Both blonde, both pretty, in a scrubbed, sun-faded way. They stopped when they saw her. "Morning, Clara. Sarah," Henry said. "Morning, Mr. Henry," the taller one, Clara, said. Her eyes stayed on Lydia. "You're the mail-order bride." It wasn't a question. "I'm Lydia Rowan," Lydia said. "Soon to be Lydia Hale," Sarah added. She had a sweeter face than her sister, but her voice carried an edge. "That must be exciting." "It's a practical arrangement," Lydia said. Clara laughed. "Practical, that's one word for it." "Clara," Henry said, warning. "What?" "I'm just making conversation." Clara stepped closer, studying Lydia like she was a dress she was considering buying. "You know, Sarah here was sweet on Garrett for years. Brought him pies, mended his shirts, did everything but throw herself at his feet." Sarah's face went red. "Clara, stop." "It's true," Clara continued, ignoring her. "But he never looked twice at her. Never looked twice at any woman in this town. Then suddenly, he sends away for a stranger. Makes a person wonder what's wrong with us." "Nothing's wrong with you," Lydia said quietly. "Maybe something's wrong with me." That stopped Clara mid-breath. Sarah looked away, embarrassed. Henry cleared his throat. "Ladies, if you're not here to buy anything—" "We are," Clara said, still watching Lydia. "Just wanted to say welcome to Caldwell Flats. I'm sure you'll fit right in." The way she said it made it clear she believed the opposite. Lydia didn't flinch. "Thank you." Clara smiled, sharp, and moved past her toward the counter. Garrett reappeared at Lydia's elbow, a coil of rope in one hand. He looked at Clara and Sarah, then at Lydia, and something in his expression shifted. Not much, just enough. "We done here?" he asked Henry. "Almost," Henry said, loading supplies into a crate. "Give me another minute." Garrett nodded and turned to Lydia. "You need anything?" "No." "You sure?" She was about to say yes when she realized he wasn't just asking about supplies. He was asking if she was all right, if she needed him to step in. "I'm sure," she said. He held her gaze for a moment longer, then nodded and moved back toward the counter. Clara watched the exchange with narrowed eyes. The ride back to the ranch was quiet again, but this time Lydia broke it. "Clara said Sarah was sweet on you." Garrett's hands tightened on the reins. "Clara talks too much." "Was she lying?" "No." "Did you know?" "Yeah." "And?" "And what?" He glanced at her, frowning. "I wasn't interested." "Why not? She's pretty." "Doesn't matter." "Then what does?" Garrett was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "She wanted something from me I couldn't give her." "What's that?" "Doesn't matter," he said again, and Lydia understood that was the end of the conversation. But later that night, after supper, after Garrett had gone out to check on the horses, Lydia sat on the porch and thought about what he'd said. She wanted something from me I couldn't give her. And she wondered, what did he think she wanted? What did he think he could give? Or maybe the better question was, what had broken inside him that made him believe he had nothing left to offer? On the 5th day, Lydia went into town alone. Garrett had work to do, something about a fence line on the north pasture, and she needed thread and a few other small things. She'd also decided that if she was going to live here, she needed to stop avoiding people. She walked this time. 5 miles wasn't nothing, but she'd walked farther. The main street was quieter in the afternoon. A few people nodded as she passed. Most didn't. She kept her head up and her pace steady. Inside the dry goods store, Henry greeted her with the same neutral politeness as before. She bought what she needed, paid, and turned to leave. That's when she heard the voices outside. Don't trust her. You don't trust anyone, Martha. And I'm usually right. What kind of woman agrees to marry a man she's never met? A desperate one. Exactly. And desperate people bring trouble. Lydia stood just inside the doorway, out of sight. She knew she should walk out, face them, show she didn't care. But she stayed. Garrett's made his choice, a male voice said. Not much we can do about it. We could talk to him, make him see reason. Garrett doesn't listen to anyone, you know that. Then maybe we talk to her, make it clear she's not welcome. She already knows that. Good. Lydia's hands curled into fists. She waited until the voices faded, then stepped outside. The street was empty again. Whoever had been talking was gone. She walked home slowly, turning the conversation over in her mind. Desperate people bring trouble. They weren't wrong. She was desperate. And she had brought trouble, in a way. Just not the kind they thought. By the time she reached the ranch, the sun was starting to set. Garrett was on the porch, bent over something, a piece of harness it looked like, that he was mending. He looked up when she approached. You all right? Fine, Lydia said. He studied her for a moment, then went back to his work. You're a bad liar. I'm a great liar, Lydia said. You just happen to be observant. That surprised a sound out of him. Not quite a laugh, but close. He set the harness aside. What happened? Nothing, just people talking. About you? About us? Garrett's jaw tightened. What did they say? Does it matter? Yeah, it does. Lydia sat down on the step beside him, careful to keep a foot of space between them. They think I'm going to cause you trouble. You probably will, Garrett said. People like us usually do. She looked at him. People like us? People who don't fit, he said. People who make others uncomfortable just by existing. It was the most honest thing he'd said to her since she'd arrived. Why don't you fit? Lydia asked. Garrett picked up the harness again, running his thumb over the worn leather. I came here 6 years ago. Bought the land cheap because no one else wanted it. Worked it myself, didn't ask for help, didn't offer friendship. Just existed. That's not a crime. No, but it makes people nervous. They want to understand you. Put you in a box. I don't fit in any of their boxes. What about before? Lydia asked. Before you came here? His hand stilled. For a moment she thought he might actually answer. Then he stood, gathering the harness. That's not a today conversation either. He walked toward the barn, leaving her alone on the porch again. Lydia watched him go and thought about boxes, about the ones people had tried to put her in, about the ones she'd broken out of, and about the one she'd chosen to step into when she'd agreed to marry Garrett Hale. The wedding was set for Sunday, 5 days away. On Wednesday, Garrett rode into town to finalize arrangements with the preacher. He came back 2 hours later, his face tight. What happened? Lydia asked. He dismounted, handed the reins to her without meeting her eyes. Take care of him. I'll be in the barn. Garrett, not now. He walked away before she could press. Lydia unsaddled the horse, brushed him down, and gave him water. Then she went to the barn. Garrett was standing in the shadows near the back, his hands braced against a support beam, his head down. Tell me, Lydia said. He didn't turn around. Preacher asked me if I was sure. About what? About you. Lydia felt something cold settle in her chest. What did you say? I told him yes. And he said he'd pray for me. Pray that I wasn't making a mistake. Garrett finally turned to face her. Then he asked if you were carrying another man's child. The cold spread. What? He said it's the only reason a woman like you would marry a man like me. That you must be in trouble. That I must be too desperate or too stupid to see it. Lydia's vision blurred at the edges. And you said? I told him it was none of his damn business, and that if he said one more word about you, I'd find another preacher. There isn't another preacher for 50 miles. Then we'd ride 50 miles. They stared at each other across the dim barn. Why? Lydia asked finally. Why defend me? You don't even know me. I know enough, Garrett said. You know nothing. I know you showed up. I know you've worked hard every day since you got here. I know you haven't complained once, even though this town has treated you like dirt." He stepped closer. "And I know you're not carrying another man's child, because if you were, you wouldn't be here. You'd be somewhere safe, somewhere easier." Lydia's throat felt tight. "You sound very sure." "I am." "Why?" "Because I recognize it," Garrett said quietly. "The look of someone who chose the hard thing because all the easy things were worse." Lydia looked away, looked at the dust motes drifting through the slanted light, looked at anything but him. "I'm not a good person," she said finally. "I didn't ask you to be. I've made mistakes." "So have I." "You don't understand. She stopped, the words catching. "I've hurt people. People who didn't deserve it." Garrett was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "You kill anyone?" "No." "Steal anything that mattered?" "No." "Then whatever else you did, it's between you and your conscience, not me, not this town, just you." Lydia finally looked at him, really looked at him, at the lines around his eyes, at the scar that cut through his left eyebrow, at the way he held himself like someone who'd learned not to expect gentleness from the world. "What did you do?" she asked. "To make this town afraid of you?" "I stopped letting them see me bleed," Garrett said. "Turns out that scares people more than anger ever could." He walked past her, back toward the house, and this time Lydia didn't follow. She stayed in the barn, breathing in the smell of hay and leather, and wondered what she'd gotten herself into, and whether she'd ever be able to get back out. Sunday arrived gray and cold, not raining, but threatening it. The kind of sky that pressed down on everything and made the world feel smaller. Lydia stood in the small bedroom, looking at herself in the cracked mirror propped against the wall. The dress wasn't new. She'd brought it with her, one of 3 she owned. Dark blue, practical, with buttons up to her throat. Not a wedding dress, but it would have to do. Her hands were shaking. She pressed them flat against her thighs until they stopped. A knock at the door. "You ready?" Garrett's voice. "Almost." She braided her hair, pinned it up, and took one last look at the stranger in the mirror. Then she opened the door. Garrett stood in the main room, wearing what must have been his only good shirt, white, pressed, tucked into dark trousers. He'd shaved, cut his hair. He looked different, younger, more uncertain. "You look," he started, then stopped. "Like I'm about to make a terrible mistake," Lydia finished. "I was going to say nice." "Oh." They stood there, awkward, until Garrett cleared his throat. "We should go. Preacher said 10 o'clock. The ride into town was silent. When they arrived, Lydia was surprised to see people gathered outside the church. Not many, maybe a dozen, but more than she'd expected. Henry from the dry goods store, the sheriff, Clara and Sarah, a few others whose names she didn't know. They weren't smiling. Garrett helped her down from the wagon, and for the first time he offered his arm. She took it. Together, they walked toward the church doors. And that's when someone said it. "This is wrong." Everyone stopped. Lydia turned. It was Sarah. Standing at the edge of the small crowd, her face pale, her hands clenched at her sides. "Sarah," Clara hissed. "Don't!" "I have to," Sarah said. Her voice was shaking but determined. She looked at Garrett. "You don't even know her. You don't love her. This isn't right." Garrett's expression didn't change. "It's not your concern, Sarah." "It is, because Sarah's voice broke. "Because I care about you. I have for years. And I can't watch you throw your life away on someone who doesn't belong here." The silence that followed was suffocating. Lydia felt every eye on her, felt the weight of their judgment, their doubt, their certainty that she was the problem. She could walk away. Right now. Get back in the wagon, leave Garrett standing there, and disappear before this became permanent. But then Garrett spoke. "Sarah," he said, and his voice was gentle in a way Lydia hadn't heard before. "I'm sorry if I gave you the wrong idea. I'm sorry if I hurt you, but this is my choice, my life. And I'm asking you, all of you, to respect that." "We're just trying to protect you," Sarah whispered. "I don't need protecting," Garrett said. "I need you to let me be." Sarah's face crumpled. Clara put an arm around her and led her away. The rest of the crowd shifted, uncertain. Then the preacher appeared in the doorway, a thin man with gray hair and a disapproving mouth. "Are we doing this or not?" he asked. Garrett looked down at Lydia. "Are we?" And Lydia realized this was it, the last moment, the last chance to run. She thought about Victor, about the life she'd left, about all the reasons she'd come here in the first place. Then she thought about the man standing beside her, the one who'd defended her to a preacher, who told a woman he'd known for years that his choice was his own, the one who'd said, "I know enough." "Yes," Lydia said, "we are." They walked into the church together, and the doors closed behind them. The ceremony lasted 12 minutes. Lydia knew because she counted every one of them, watching the second hand crawl around the preacher's pocket watch that sat on the altar beside his worn Bible. 12 minutes to tie two strangers together for the rest of their lives. The preacher spoke in a monotone that suggested he'd rather be anywhere else. He skipped the parts about love and devotion, stuck to the legal requirements, and when he finally said, "You may kiss the bride," Garrett just nodded at Lydia instead. She nodded back. The preacher sighed like they'd personally disappointed him and marked something in his ledger. "That'll be $5, he said. Garrett paid him without a word. Outside, the crowd had thinned to almost nothing. Henry was still there, along with the sheriff and an older woman Lydia didn't recognize. They watched Garrett and Lydia emerge with the same expression people might wear watching a horse with a broken leg, pity mixed with inevitability. "Congratulations," Henry said, but the word landed flat. "Thanks," Garrett said. The sheriff nodded. "Mrs. Hale." The name hit Lydia like cold water. Mrs. Hale. She was Mrs. Hale now. She'd thought she was prepared for it, but hearing it out loud made it real in a way the ceremony hadn't. "Sheriff," she managed. They climbed back into the wagon. Garrett took the reins. The horse started forward, and Caldwell Flats fell away behind them. Neither of them spoke until they were a mile out. Then Garrett said, "I'm sorry." Lydia looked at him. "For what?" "That wasn't much of a wedding." "I wasn't expecting much of a wedding." "Still," he kept his eyes on the road. "You deserved better than that." "Did I?" Lydia asked. "You don't know what I deserve." "Neither do they," Garrett said. But that didn't stop them from deciding. Lydia turned that over in her mind. He was right. The town had already made up its mind about her before she'd even arrived. Nothing she did would change that. She could be perfect, sweet and demure and everything a frontier wife was supposed to be, and they'd still find reasons to doubt her. "So what do we do?" she asked. "We live our lives," Garrett said, "and we let them think whatever they want." It sounded simple. Lydia suspected it wouldn't be. When they got back to the ranch, Garrett unhitched the wagon while Lydia went inside and stood in the middle of the main room, feeling unmoored. She was married now. This was her home, her life, and she had no idea what she was supposed to do with it. Garrett came in a few minutes later, hat in hand, and stopped when he saw her still standing there. "You all right?" he asked. "I don't know," Lydia said honestly. He nodded like that made perfect sense. "You want some coffee?" "Sure." He made coffee. She sat at the table. They drank it in silence, and somehow that felt more honest than anything the preacher had said. "I'm going to check the north fence," Garrett said eventually. "Should be back before dark." "All right." He hesitated at the door. "You're not a prisoner here. You know that, right? You can go into town, visit, do whatever you need to do." "I know," Lydia said, but they both knew she wouldn't. Not yet. After he left, Lydia changed out of her wedding dress and into her work clothes. Then she cleaned the kitchen, even though it was already clean, swept the floor, even though it didn't need it, and tried not to think about the fact that she'd just married a man she barely knew. She was scrubbing a pot that didn't need scrubbing when she heard the sound of hoofbeats outside. Her first thought was that Garrett had come back early, but when she looked out the window, she saw 3 riders approaching the house. None of them were Garrett. Lydia dried her hands and stepped out onto the porch. The riders stopped a few yards away. 2 men and a woman, all around her age. The woman sat in the middle, straight-backed and sharp-eyed, wearing a riding outfit that looked expensive even covered in dust. "You're Lydia," the woman said. Not a question. "I am. I'm Margaret Brennan. This is my property to the east." She gestured to the 2 men flanking her. "These are my ranch hands, Cole and Dutch. Lydia nodded. Nice to meet you. Is it? Margaret's smile was thin. I came to see what kind of woman marries Garrett Hale. And what did you find? Still deciding, Margaret looked her up and down. You're younger than I expected, prettier too. Makes me wonder even more what you're running from. I'm not running, Lydia said. Everyone's running from something out here. That's why we're here instead of somewhere easier. Margaret leaned forward in her saddle. But here's the thing. When you run to a place like this, you become part of it. And that means we become each other's business whether we like it or not. I don't see how my marriage is your business, Lydia said. It is when your husband's land shares a border with mine, when his cattle graze near my water, when his decisions affect my livelihood. Margaret's eyes narrowed. Garrett's been a good neighbor, quiet, fair, doesn't cause trouble. I'd hate for that to change. Why would it change? Because trouble follows certain kinds of people, and you have that look. Lydia felt her spine stiffen. What look is that? Desperate, Margaret said, and desperate people make bad choices. Cole, one of the ranch hands, shifted in his saddle. Mrs. Brennan, maybe we should… I'm not finished, Margaret cut him off. She looked back at Lydia. I'm not trying to be cruel. I'm trying to be clear. You want to make a life here? Fine. But don't bring whatever you're running from to our doorstep. Don't make Garrett pay for your mistakes. And don't expect this town to welcome you with open arms because we've all got enough problems without adding yours. Lydia's hands curled into fists at her sides. You finished now? Margaret smiled. For now. She turned her horse and rode off, her ranch hands following. Lydia stood on the porch and watched them disappear over the rise, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. When Garrett came back that evening, she told him about the visit. He listened without interrupting, his face unreadable. Margaret's protective of her land, he said finally, and she's not wrong about trouble following people. You're defending her? No, I'm explaining her. Garrett set his hat on the table. She lost her husband 3 years ago. Ranch almost went under. She fought like hell to save it. Now she sees threats everywhere. So I'm a threat. You're an unknown. That's worse. Lydia sank into a chair. How long before I stop being unknown? Out here? Could be years. Could be never. Garrett pulled out the chair across from her and sat down. But it doesn't matter what they think. It matters what we do. And what are we doing? Living, Garrett said. Working, surviving, same as everyone else. It sounded so simple when he said it. Lydia wanted to believe it could be that simple. But 3 days later, she went into town and learned otherwise. She needed flour. They were almost out, and Garrett was busy with a sick calf, so she hitched up the wagon herself and made the trip alone. The dry goods store was busy when she arrived. Half a dozen women clustered around the counter, talking in low voices that stopped the moment Lydia walked in. She kept her head up and moved toward the shelves in the back. Behind her, the whispers started. That's her. Bold as brass, walking in here like she owns the place. Did you see her at the wedding? No emotion at all, like a business transaction. Well, that's what it was, wasn't it? Lydia found the flour and carried it to the counter. The women parted to let her through, but none of them looked at her directly. Henry appeared from the back room. Mrs. Hale, he said, and she wondered if she imagined the slight emphasis on the name. Find everything you need? Yes, thank you. That'll be $1.20. Lydia paid him and turned to leave. That's when one of the women spoke up. You settling in all right? It was the older woman from the wedding. Up close, she had a kind face but hard eyes. Yes, thank you, Lydia said. Must be different from what you're used to. Everything's different from something. The woman smiled. That's true. I'm Ruth Anderson. I run the boarding house. Nice to meet you. You know, if you ever need anything, advice, help, someone to talk to, you can come by. We women need to stick together out here. It sounded genuine, but Lydia had learned to be careful about things that sounded genuine. I appreciate that, she said. Of course, sticking together means being honest with each other, too. Ruth's smile didn't waver. And I have to say there are some of us who are concerned. Concerned about what? About Garrett. About whether he knows what he's gotten himself into. The other women had gone quiet, watching. Lydia set the flower down on the counter. I think Garrett can make his own decisions. Can he? Ruth asked. Because from where we're standing, it looks like you showed up out of nowhere, convinced him to marry you, and now here you are. Some folks might wonder what your real intentions are. My real intentions are to be his wife, Lydia said. And what does that mean to you? Because marriage means different things to different people. Lydia felt heat crawl up her neck. It means what it means. Does it mean you'll help him, support him, or does it mean you'll use him until something better comes along? I don't know what you want me to say, Lydia said. The truth, Ruth said simply. Why did you really come here? The other women leaned in, waiting. Lydia looked at them, at their faces, their certainty, their need to understand her so they could categorize her and file her away. Because I had nowhere else to go, Lydia said. Is that what you wanted to hear? That I'm desperate? That I needed help? Fine. It's true. I came here because Garrett offered me something when no one else would. And if that makes me a bad person in your eyes, then I guess I'm a bad person. Ruth's expression softened slightly. I don't think you're a bad person. I think you're a scared one. And scared people can be dangerous. I'm not dangerous. Maybe not on purpose, Ruth said, but trouble has a way of finding scared people. And when it does, it spreads to everyone around them. Lydia picked up the flower. I need to go. Think about what I said, Ruth called after her. Lydia didn't respond. She walked out of the store, loaded the flower into the wagon, and climbed up onto the seat. Her hands were shaking again. She sat there for a full minute, trying to calm down, when she heard footsteps. Clara appeared beside the wagon, without Sarah this time. You all right? Clara asked. Fine. You don't look fine. I'm fine, Lydia repeated. Clara studied her for a moment, then sighed. Look, I'm not going to pretend I like you. I don't know you well enough to like you or not like you, but that thing Sarah did at the wedding, that was out of line. And what Ruth just did in there? Also out of line. Lydia looked at her surprised. You heard? Everyone heard. Ruth's not exactly subtle. Clara crossed her arms. She thinks she's protecting the town, protecting Garrett, but mostly she's just protecting her own sense of how things should be. And how should things be? I don't know, Clara said, but I don't think it's my job to decide for other people. It was the closest thing to kindness Lydia had received from anyone in Caldwell Flats. Thank you, she said. Clara shrugged. Don't thank me yet. I still think you're probably going to cause problems, but at least you're honest about it. She walked away before Lydia could respond. The ride back to the ranch felt longer than usual. By the time Lydia pulled up to the house, the sun was starting to set and Garrett was sitting on the porch, whittling something. He looked up when she stopped the wagon, looked at her face, set down his knife. What happened? He asked. Lydia climbed down, tied off the horse, and carried the flower inside without answering. Garrett followed her. Lydia, what happened? Nothing. Don't do that. Don't lie to me. She set the flower down harder than necessary. Why do you care? You barely know me. This is just an arrangement, remember? Garrett flinched like she'd slapped him. The silence stretched between them. You're right, he said finally. I barely know you. But that doesn't mean I don't care if someone hurts you. Lydia turned to look at him. Why? Because you're my wife now. And out here, that means something. Does it? Because in town, it seems to mean I'm your burden. What did they say? Lydia told him. All of it. Ruth's questions, the other women's stares, the whispers she'd heard on her first visit and every visit since. Garrett listened, his jaw getting tighter with every sentence. When she finished, he didn't say anything for a long moment. Then he walked to the door, grabbed his hat, and headed for the wagon. Where are you going? Lydia asked. Into town. Don't. They need to hear nothing, Lydia said. It won't change anything. It'll just make it worse. So what? I'm supposed to let them talk about you like that? Yes, Lydia said, because if you go in there and defend me, it'll just prove them right. They'll say I have you under my thumb, that I'm manipulating you, that you're not thinking clearly. Garrett threw his hat across the room. It hit the wall and fell to the floor. So what do we do? He asked, and his voice was rough. Just take it? For now, Lydia said. until they get bored or find someone else to talk about. That could take months, years. Then it takes years. Garrett paced to the window and back. I'm not good at this. Letting things go. Staying quiet when something's wrong. Neither am I, Lydia said. But I'm learning. He looked at her, really looked at her, and something shifted in his expression. What did you run from? He asked quietly. Lydia's breath caught. I told you I don't want to talk about it. I know, but maybe you should. Why? Because it's eating you up, Garrett said. I can see it. Every time someone looks at you wrong or says something cruel, you take it like you deserve it, like you've got some debt to pay. Maybe I do. Or maybe you made a mistake and you're punishing yourself for it. He stepped closer. I know what that looks like. I've been doing it for 6 years. Lydia's throat felt tight. What did you do? I had a wife, Garrett said, before I came here. Her name was Catherine. We lived in Missouri, had a farm, had a life. He stopped, and Lydia waited. There was an accident, he continued. A fire. Started in the barn, spread to the house. I was in town. By the time I got back, he trailed off, staring at nothing. I should have been there, should have been able to stop it, but I wasn't, and she died. That's not your fault, Lydia said. Everyone said that, but it didn't change the fact that she was gone and I was still here. Garrett's hands clenched at his sides. So I sold everything, came out here, told myself I'd start over. But you can't start over. You just keep going and hope eventually it stops hurting so much. Lydia felt something crack open inside her chest. I had a husband too, she said. His name was Victor. We weren't married long, 6 months maybe. He was charming, successful. Everyone loved him. But, Garrett prompted, but he wasn't a good man. Lydia wrapped her arms around herself. He was controlling, possessive. If I talked to someone he didn't like, he'd sulk for days. If I went somewhere without telling him, he'd accuse me of lying. It got worse over time. The accusations. The anger. Did he hurt you? Not physically. Not at first. Lydia's voice dropped. But words hurt too, and isolation, and making you feel like you're crazy for being upset about things that are actually wrong. Garrett's expression went dark. How did you get away? His family had money, connections. I knew if I just left, he'd find me, drag me back, make it worse. Lydia took a breath. So I did something I'm not proud of. What? I went to his business partner, a man named James who'd always been kind to me. I told him what was happening. I didn't ask for help, but he offered it anyway. He gave me money. Enough to disappear. She looked down at her hands. Victor found out. He thinks I was having an affair with James, that I seduced him, stole from both of them, and ran. Were you? No, but it doesn't matter. That's the story Victor told everyone, and people believed him because he's charming, and I'm just some girl who married above her station. Lydia met Garrett's eyes. So yes, I'm running, and yes, I'm desperate, and everyone in this town is right to be suspicious of me. No, they're not, Garrett said. Why not? Because you didn't do anything wrong. You survived. That's not a crime. Lydia laughed, but it came out broken. Tell that to Victor, or to the people back home who think I'm a thief and a whore. They don't know you. Neither do you. Maybe not, Garrett said, but I know what it looks like when someone's been broken down and put back together wrong, and I know you're not the person Victor tried to make you believe you are. Lydia wanted to believe him. She wanted it so badly it hurt. How can you be sure? She asked. Because if you were that person, you wouldn't be standing here feeling guilty about it. You'd be long gone with someone else's money. Garrett stepped closer. You're not running anymore, Lydia. You're here. You married me. You're trying to make this work even though this town is doing everything it can to push you out. Maybe I'm just stubborn. Maybe, Garrett agreed, but I think it's more than that. I think you want this to work because you finally found a place where you can stop pretending, where you don't have to be perfect or charming or whatever Victor wanted you to be. You can just be you. The words hit Lydia like a physical thing. She sat down at the table before her legs gave out. Garrett sat across from her the same way he had their first night, the same way he had after the wedding. We're a mess, aren't we? Lydia said. Yeah, Garrett said, we are. Think we can make this work anyway? I don't know it, he said honestly, but I'm willing to try if you are. Lydia looked at him, at this man who'd lost everything and rebuilt himself into someone quiet and careful and kind in ways he probably didn't even realize. Okay, she said, let's try. That night they ate dinner together and talked. Not about their pasts, not about the town, just about small things. The weather, the horses, the fence that needed mending. It felt normal, almost easy. And for the first time since she'd arrived, Lydia thought maybe, just maybe, this could actually become home. But the next morning, everything changed. Garrett went out early to check the cattle. When he came back 2 hours later, his face was pale with fury. What's wrong? Lydia asked. Someone cut the north fence, he said. Half my herd scattered. Took me an hour just to round up the ones I could find. Cut it? You mean on purpose? Yeah. Garrett's hands were shaking. And there's tracks leading back toward town. Lydia felt ice settle in her stomach. You think someone from Caldwell Flats did this? I don't know, but I'm going to find out. He left before she could stop him, and Lydia stood in the empty house, listening to the silence, and knew with absolute certainty that things were about to get much, much worse. Lydia waited 2 hours before she couldn't stand it anymore. She saddled one of the horses, a mare named Dot, that Garrett had said was gentle, and rode into town herself. The animal sensed her nerves and kept tossing her head, but Lydia held firm. She'd learned to ride as a girl, though it had been years, and her thighs were already aching by the time Caldwell Flats came into view. She found Garrett outside the sheriff's office, talking to a small group of men. His voice was low, but his posture was rigid, and even from a distance, Lydia could see the tension in his shoulders. She dismounted and tied Dot to the rail. When she approached, the conversation stopped. The sheriff looked at her with something like resignation. Mrs. Hale. What's going on? Lydia asked. Your husband's making accusations, one of the other men said. She recognized him. Dutch, one of Margaret Brennan's ranch hands. Not accusations, Garrett said. Facts. Someone cut my fence and scattered my cattle. The tracks lead toward town. Tracks lead lots of places, Dutch said. Doesn't mean they came from here. Then where did they come from? Could be drifters. Could be someone passing through. Dutch shrugged. Could be you're looking for someone to blame and we're convenient. Garrett took a step forward and the sheriff moved between them. Easy, the sheriff said. Everyone just settle down. I'm settled, Garrett said, but his hands were clenched. I'm also missing 20 head of cattle, and I want to know who's responsible. And we'll look into it, the sheriff said. But you can't just come in here throwing around accusations without proof. I have proof. I have tracks. Tracks aren't proof, Dutch said. They're just tracks. Lydia stepped up beside Garrett. Did you follow them? See where they went? Garrett glanced at her. Lost them about a mile out. Ground's too hard. Convenient, Dutch muttered. What's that supposed to mean? Garrett asked. Means maybe there weren't any tracks to follow. Maybe you're making this whole thing up. The sheriff held up both hands. All right, that's enough. Dutch, go on. I'll handle this. Dutch gave Garrett a long look before walking away. The other men dispersed too, leaving just the three of them standing in the street. You really think someone from town did this? The sheriff asked. I don't know what to think, Garrett said, but it wasn't an accident. Someone cut that fence deliberately. Any enemies? Someone with a grudge? No. The sheriff looked at Lydia. What about you, Mrs. Hale? You make any enemies since you got here? Lydia felt the question like a slap. Are you asking if I cut my own husband's fence? I'm asking if there's anyone who might want to cause you trouble. Half the town wants to cause me trouble, Lydia said, but I don't think any of them would stoop to sabotage. You sure about that? No, Lydia admitted. I'm not sure about anything. The sheriff sighed. Look, I'll ask around, see if anyone saw anything. But without more to go on, there's not much I can do. So that's it? Garrett asked. That's it for now. You find more evidence, you bring it to me. Until then, I suggest you watch your property more carefully. Garrett looked like he wanted to argue, but Lydia touched his arm. Come on, she said quietly. Let's go home. He pulled away from her touch but didn't protest. They walked to their horses in silence. On the ride back, Garrett didn't say a word. His jaw was set so tight, Lydia thought it might crack. When they reached the ranch, he dismounted and went straight to the barn without looking at her. Lydia took care of both horses, giving him space. But when she went inside an hour later and he still hadn't come out, she went to find him. He was in the back of the barn, repairing a saddle that didn't look like it needed repairing. "You want to talk about it?" Lydia asked. "No." "Garrett," I said no. She should have left it alone, should have walked away and given him time to cool down. But something in his voice, something raw and hurt, made her stay. "This isn't your fault," she said. "Isn't it?" He threw down the leather strap he'd been working on. "I brought you here, married you, made you a target." "I was already a target the moment I arrived. You didn't do that." "I made it worse," Garrett said, "by defending you, by marrying you anyway. I put a mark on both of us. You don't know that." "Don't I?" He turned to face her. "Someone cuts my fence the week after we get married? That's not coincidence." Lydia wanted to argue, but she couldn't because he was probably right. "So what do we do?" she asked. "I don't know," Garrett said, "but I'm not letting this go. Someone did this, and I'm going to find out who." Before Lydia could respond, they heard the sound of a horse approaching, fast. They both went outside. A rider was coming up the road, a man on a black horse, moving at a pace that suggested urgency. As he got closer, Lydia's stomach dropped. She knew that horse. She knew that rider. "No," she whispered. The man pulled up in front of the house and dismounted in one smooth motion. He was tall, well-dressed, with dark hair and the kind of face that made people trust him instantly. Victor Rowan, her husband, her real husband, in the eyes of anyone who didn't know better. "Lydia," he said, and his voice was exactly as she remembered, warm, charming, and utterly false. "There you are." Garrett stepped forward. "Who the hell are you?" Victor's smile didn't waver. "Victor Rowan. I'm Lydia's husband." The word hung in the air like smoke. Garrett turned to look at Lydia. "What?" "Former husband," Lydia said quickly. "We're not—" "I left him. I told you." "You told me you had a husband," Garrett said. "You didn't tell me you were still married to him." "Because I'm not. Not legally. She's lying," Victor interrupted smoothly. "We're still very much married. She ran off 6 months ago with money that didn't belong to her, and I've been looking for her ever since." "That's not true," Lydia said. "Isn't it?" Victor pulled a folded paper from his jacket. "I have our marriage certificate right here, dated 2 years ago. Never annulled, never dissolved." Garrett took the paper, scanned it. His face went pale. "Garrett, let me explain," Lydia started. "You lied to me," Garrett said. "I didn't lie. I didn't tell you everything." "That's the same thing." Victor watched the exchange with something like satisfaction. "I can see she's caused you trouble. I apologize for that. Lydia has a way of making things complicated. But I'm here now, and I'll take her off your hands." "I'm not going anywhere with you," Lydia said. "You don't have a choice, darling. You're my wife, legally. That little ceremony you went through here?" Victor gestured dismissively. "Invalid. Meaningless. You can't marry someone when you're already married." Garrett looked at Lydia. "Is that true?" "I don't know," Lydia said. "Maybe. But I don't care. I'm not going back with him." "What you want doesn't matter," Victor said. "What matters is the law. And the law says you're mine." "She's not property," Garrett said. "No, she's my wife. Which means I have rights, including the right to take her home." Garrett's hand moved to his belt where Lydia knew he kept a knife. Victor saw it too and raised both hands in a gesture of peace. "Let's not do anything hasty," Victor said. "I'm not here to cause trouble. I'm here to collect what's mine and leave, quietly, peacefully." "And if I say no?" Lydia asked. "Then I'll go to the sheriff. Show him the marriage certificate. Explain that you're a runaway wife who stole from me and my business partner. I'll have you arrested and you'll be sent back to face charges." Victor's smile turned cold. "Your choice, Lydia. Come with me willingly or come with me in chains. Either way, you're coming." Lydia felt the world narrowing to a single point. Everything she'd run from, everything she'd tried to escape, it had all caught up to her. Garrett was still staring at the marriage certificate. "When were you going to tell me?" "I didn't think it mattered," Lydia said. I thought if I was far enough away, he'd never find me. But he did find you, and now what? Now she comes home, Victor said, where she belongs. I don't belong with you, Lydia said. I never did. You made vows, Lydia, in a church, before witnesses. You don't just get to walk away from that because it got difficult. Difficult? Lydia's voice rose. You made my life hell. You controlled everything I did, everyone I talked to. You made me feel like I was losing my mind. That's a very dramatic interpretation of me wanting my wife to act like a wife, Victor said calmly. You're twisting it, like you always do. Am I? Or are you the one who's twisted? The one who ran away because you couldn't handle a normal marriage? The one who seduced my business partner and stole from both of us? I didn't seduce anyone. James helped me because he's a decent person. James helped you because you manipulated him. Same way you're manipulating this poor man. Victor looked at Garrett. She told you she needed help, didn't she? That she was desperate? Made you feel like a hero for saving her? Don't talk to him, Lydia said. Why not? He deserves to know what he's gotten himself into. He deserves to know that my wife is a liar and a thief. Garrett finally looked up from the certificate. Get off my land. Victor raised his eyebrows. Excuse me? You heard me. Get off my land. Now. I'm not leaving without my wife. She's not your wife, Garrett said. Maybe legally, maybe on some piece of paper, but she's not yours. She made that clear when she left you. The law doesn't care what she made clear. The law cares about legal marriage, and we are legally married. Then we'll get it annulled, Garrett said. Victor laughed. On what grounds? She's the one who ran. She's the one who broke her vows. No judge is going to grant an annulment based on her word against mine. We'll find a way. No, you won't, because there isn't one. Victor took a step toward Lydia. Come on, darling, let's go home. We can work this out. I forgive you. Lydia backed away. I don't want your forgiveness. I want you to leave me alone. That's not how marriage works. Then I don't want to be married. Too bad, Victor said. You made a choice. Now live with it. Garrett moved between them. She said no. That's the end of it. And who are you to decide that? You're nothing. A rancher in the middle of nowhere who thought he could buy himself a wife. Well, you can't, because she already has a husband. I'm the man who's going to throw you off this property if you don't leave right now, Garrett said. Victor's expression hardened. You touch me and I'll have you arrested for assault. Then I guess we'll both be in jail. They stared at each other, the tension thick enough to cut. Finally, Victor stepped back. Fine. I'll go, but this isn't over. I'll be back with the sheriff, with the law on my side, and then we'll see how brave you feel. He mounted his horse and rode off without looking back. Lydia's legs gave out. She sat down hard on the porch steps. Garrett stood there for a long moment, still holding the marriage certificate. Then he crumpled it up and threw it into the dirt. Why didn't you tell me? He asked. Because I didn't think it mattered. I thought I was far enough away. I thought he'd give up. But he didn't. No, Lydia said. He didn't. Garrett sat down beside her, careful to leave space between them. Is what he said true? About the theft? No, James gave me money to help me leave. I didn't steal it. Can you prove that? No, Lydia admitted. James is Victor's business partner. He's not going to contradict Victor's story. It would ruin him. So it's your word against his. Yes. Garrett rubbed his face with both hands. This is a mess. I know. I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't fix it. I know that too. They sat in silence. The sun was starting to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. What do we do? Lydia asked finally. I don't know, Garrett said. But he's right about one thing. If you're still legally married to him, then our marriage isn't valid, which means you have no legal protection from him. He can force you to go back. I won't go. Then he'll have you arrested, and I can't stop that. Lydia felt tears burning behind her eyes, but refused to let them fall. So that's it? I have to choose between going back to him or going to jail. There has to be another option. There isn't. I looked into it before I left. I talked to a lawyer. He said, unless I could prove Victor was violent or unfaithful, I had no grounds for divorce. And even if I did, the process would take years. Years of Victor knowing where I was. Years of him controlling me. So you ran instead? Yes. Garrett was quiet for a long time. Then he said, maybe we can find proof of the violence. There is no proof. He never hit me, never left marks. Emotional violence counts. Not in the eyes of the law. Not when it's a husband disciplining his wife. Lydia's voice was bitter. That's what they call it. Discipline. That's not what it is. No, but that's how it's seen. Garrett stood up, paced to the edge of the porch and back. There has to be something we can do. There isn't. I've thought about this for months. There's no way out, not a legal one. Then we'll find an illegal one. Lydia looked up at him. What? You heard me. If the law won't protect you, then we'll do it ourselves. Garrett, you can't what? Can't help my wife? Because that's what you are. I don't care what some piece of paper says. You're my wife. You chose me. You married me. And I'm not letting him take you. The tears finally spilled over. Lydia wiped them away angrily. You don't understand. He won't stop. He'll come back with the sheriff. He'll make everyone believe his version. And they will, because he's charming and convincing and I'm just some woman who ran away. Then we'll leave, Garrett said, both of us, tonight. We'll pack up and go somewhere he can't find us. And give up everything you've built here, your land, your home? It's just land, just a house. It's your life. So are you, Garrett said. The words hit Lydia like a physical blow. She stared at him, this man she barely knew, who was offering to give up everything for her. Why? She whispered. Why would you do that? Garrett sat back down beside her, closer this time. Because 6 years ago, I lost someone I loved because I wasn't there when she needed me. I'm not making that mistake again. I'm not Catherine, I know, but you're someone who needs help, and I'm someone who can give it. That's enough. Lydia shook her head. It's not enough. You'd resent me eventually, for making you leave, for ruining your life. My life was already ruined. You're the first thing in 6 years that's made me feel like maybe it doesn't have to stay that way. They sat there in the fading light, not touching, but somehow connected. Finally, Lydia said, I can't let you do this. It's not fair to you. Fair doesn't matter. Yes, it does. You deserve better than this, better than me. I don't want better, Garrett said. I just want you to be safe. Lydia wanted to argue, wanted to push him away before he got hurt because of her, but she was so tired of fighting, so tired of being alone. Okay, she said finally. We'll figure something out, together. Garrett nodded. Together. But even as they sat there making plans, Lydia knew the truth. Victor wouldn't stop. He'd come back. And when he did, everything would fall apart. The next morning, Lydia woke before dawn to find Garrett already gone. She found a note on the table in his rough handwriting, checking the property. Back by noon. Lock the doors. She did as he asked, though she wasn't sure what good locks would do. By mid-morning, she heard horses again. Multiple this time. When she looked out the window, her heart sank. Victor was back, and he'd brought the sheriff. She opened the door before they could knock. Mrs. Rowan, the sheriff said, and the use of her old name felt like a knife. It's Mrs. Hale, Lydia said. Not according to this. The sheriff held up the marriage certificate. According to this, you're still married to Mr. Rowan here. That marriage is over. Marriage doesn't work that way, ma'am. You can't just decide it's over. There's a legal process. Then I want to start that process. That's something you'll have to take up with a judge. But until then, Mr. Rowan here has the legal right to take you home. This is my home. No, ma'am. Your home is with your legal husband. Victor had the decency to look sympathetic. I know this is difficult, Lydia, but you have to see reason. We made vows. We have responsibilities to each other. The only responsibility I have is to myself, Lydia said. That's not how marriage works. You know that. The sheriff shifted uncomfortably. Ma'am, I don't want to have to force this, but I will if I have to. Mr. Rowan has shown me documentation proving you're married, and he's filed a complaint about the theft. I have to take that seriously. I didn't steal anything. That's for a court to decide, but right now I need you to come with us. No. Ma'am, I said no. I'm not going anywhere with him. Then I'll have to arrest you, the sheriff said, for theft, and for entering into a false marriage. That's fraud, ma'am. Lydia felt the walls closing in. That's when she heard another horse approaching. Garrett. He rode up fast, dismounted before his horse had fully stopped, and took in the scene. "What's going on?" he demanded. "Mr. Hale," the sheriff said, "I'm here on official business." "What business?" "I have a legal complaint from Mr. Rowan regarding his wife." "She's not his wife. She's mine." "That's where you're wrong," the sheriff said. "She's legally married to Mr. Rowan, has been for 2 years, which means your marriage is invalid." Garrett looked at Lydia. She saw the question in his eyes. "Did you know?" And she had to nod. She had known. Or suspected. She just hadn't wanted to face it. "So what now?" Garrett asked. "Now Mrs. Rowan comes with us. Back to town. And eventually back east to face charges." "Over my dead body," Garrett said. The sheriff's hand moved to his gun. "Don't make this harder than it has to be. You're the one making it hard. She doesn't want to go. That should be the end of it. The law doesn't care what she wants. The law cares about what's legal. And legally, she belongs to Mr. Rowan. People don't belong to other people. Wives belong to their husbands. That's how it works." Garrett stepped forward, and the sheriff drew his gun. "Don't," the sheriff warned. Victor held up a hand. "Gentlemen, please. There's no need for violence. Lydia, just come with me. We'll work this out. I promise." "Your promises are worth nothing," Lydia said. "Then come with me anyway, because you don't have a choice." And the terrible thing was, he was right. Lydia looked at Garrett, at his face full of helpless fury, and made a decision. "I'll go," she said quietly. "Lydia, no," Garrett started. "I'll go," she repeated. "But not because of him. Because I don't want you to get shot for me." "I don't care." "I do," Lydia said. "I care. So I'm going." She walked to Victor's horse. He helped her up behind him, his hand on her waist, possessive and triumphant. Garrett stood there, watching, his hands clenched into fists. As they rode away, Lydia looked back once. Garrett was still standing there. And in that moment, she knew 2 things with absolute certainty. 1, she'd made a terrible mistake marrying him without telling him the full truth. And 2, she wasn't going to let Victor win. Not this time. Not ever again. They took her to the boarding house. Not to jail, as Lydia had expected, but to Ruth Anderson's establishment on the edge of town. The sheriff said it was temporary until arrangements could be made for her transport back east. Victor said it was a kindness, giving her time to come to her senses in comfortable surroundings. Lydia said nothing. Ruth showed her to a small room on the 2nd floor with a window that overlooked the main street. The door had a lock, but Ruth kept the key. "I'm sorry about this," Ruth said, and she almost sounded like she meant it. "But you understand we can't just let you leave." "I understand you're keeping me prisoner," Lydia said. "You're not a prisoner. You're a guest. Guests can leave." Ruth's expression tightened. "You brought this on yourself, running away from your husband, lying about who you were. What did you think would happen?" "I thought I'd be safe." "Safe from what? A man who came all this way to bring you home? That doesn't sound like a monster to me. That sounds like a man who loves his wife." Lydia laughed, and the sound was sharp enough to make Ruth flinch. "You don't know anything about love." "And you do? You, who married one man while still bound to another?" "I married Garrett because he offered me something Victor never did. A choice." "Marriage isn't about choices. It's about commitment. Duty. You made a vow. A vow he broke the moment he tried to control every part of my life," Lydia interrupted. "But I don't expect you to understand that. You've already decided I'm the villain here." Ruth looked at her for a long moment. "I've decided you're a woman who made a mess and is trying to blame everyone but herself for it." She left, locking the door behind her. Lydia sat on the narrow bed and stared at the wall. She thought about Garrett, about the look on his face when she'd ridden away. She thought about the ranch, the life she'd barely started to build. She thought about Victor and the way his hand had felt on her waist, possessive, certain of his ownership. She thought about giving up. It would be easier to just go with Victor, to stop fighting, to accept that some battles couldn't be won. She'd tried that before, in the early days of their marriage. She'd tried to be the wife he wanted, to smooth herself down into something he could approve of. It hadn't worked then. It wouldn't work now. But what choice did she have? The law was on his side. The town believed his version of events. Even Garrett, who'd defended her, who'd offered to run away with her, even he'd looked at her differently when he realized she'd kept the truth from him. She'd ruined everything, just like Victor always said she would. The sun set, the room grew dark. Lydia didn't bother lighting the lamp. Sometime after midnight, she heard a sound at the window. At first, she thought she'd imagined it. Then it came again, a soft tap, like a pebble against glass. She crossed to the window and looked down. Garrett stood in the street below, half hidden in shadow. Lydia's heart jumped. She tried to open the window, but it was stuck. She pushed harder and it finally gave, scraping open with a sound that seemed impossibly loud in the quiet night. "What are you doing here?" she whispered. "Getting you out," Garrett said. "You can't. They'll arrest you." "Let them try." He held up a rope. "Can you climb down?" Lydia looked at the rope, at the 2-story drop, at Garrett's upturned face. She looked back at the locked door. "Yes," she said. Garrett tied one end of the rope to the hitching post and threw the other end up. It took 3 tries before Lydia caught it. She tied it around the bedpost, tested it, and climbed out the window. She'd never been good with heights. Halfway down, her hands started shaking so badly she almost lost her grip. But Garrett was there, his voice steady and low, talking her through it. "That's it. Just a little more. I've got you." When her feet touched the ground, her legs nearly gave out. Garrett caught her, held her steady. "You all right?" he asked. "No. Yes? I don't know." She looked up at the window. "We need to go. Now." They ran to where Garrett had tied his horse in the alley behind the dry goods store. He helped her up, then swung up behind her, and they rode out of town at a pace just short of a gallop. They were a mile out when Lydia finally spoke. "This was stupid. They'll come after us." "I know. They'll think you kidnapped me." "Probably. Garrett, this is serious. You could hang for this." "I'm aware," he said, "but I'm not leaving you there." "Why not? I lied to you. I should have told you about Victor, about the marriage." "Yeah, you should have, but I understand why you didn't." Lydia twisted in the saddle to look at him. "How can you understand? I made you complicit in something illegal. Our marriage isn't even real." "Feels real to me," Garrett said. The simple statement hit her harder than any grand declaration could have. "Where are we going?" she asked. "I don't know yet. Somewhere they won't find us." "There's nowhere they won't find us. Victor has money, resources. He won't stop." "Then we'll keep moving." "For how long?" "The rest of our lives." "If that's what it takes." Lydia turned back around, her throat tight. "I can't ask you to do this." "You're not asking. I'm offering." They rode in silence for another mile before Lydia said, "There might be another way." "What way?" "I could confront him. Victor. Really confront him, not just run. Make him tell the truth about what our marriage was really like." "You think he'd admit to it?" "No, but maybe I could get him angry enough to show his real self, in front of witnesses." Garrett was quiet for a moment. "That's dangerous. Everything's dangerous now. If he hurts you, he won't, not in public. He's too smart for that." Lydia took a breath. "But I need you to trust me. Can you do that?" Garrett's arms tightened around her slightly. "Yeah, I can do that." They rode back toward town, but instead of going straight there, they stopped at the ranch first. Garrett needed supplies, he said. But Lydia suspected he needed time to prepare himself for whatever was about to happen. Inside the house, Lydia paced while Garrett gathered things. "What if this doesn't work?" she asked. "Then we go back to the original plan. We run. And if they catch us, they won't." "You can't know that." Garrett stopped what he was doing and looked at her. "You're right. I can't. But I can know this. I'm not letting Victor take you, not without a fight." Lydia's eyes stung. "Why do you care so much? You barely know me." "I know enough. I know you're brave. I know you're stubborn. I know you're trying to survive something that would have broken most people." He stepped closer. "And I know that when you showed up here, desperate and scared, you still looked me in the eye and made a deal. No apologies, no excuses, just honest need. That's more than most people are capable of." "I'm not brave," Lydia said. "I'm terrified." "Being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you do the thing anyway." She wanted to believe him, wanted to believe she was capable of being the person he seemed to see when he looked at her. "What if I fail?" she whispered. "Then we try something else." It was such a simple answer, such an impossible one. But coming from Garrett, it felt true. They returned to town just after dawn. This time, Lydia didn't hide. She walked straight down the main street to the boarding house and knocked on the door. Ruth answered, her face going pale when she saw who it was. How did you? I need to speak with Victor, Lydia said. Is he here? You can't just. The sheriff needs to know you're back. Then get the sheriff, get Victor, get anyone you want. But I'm not running anymore. Ruth stared at her for a moment longer, then stepped aside. Lydia walked into the boarding house like she owned it. Garrett followed, silent but present. Within 10 minutes, word had spread. The sheriff arrived. Then Victor, still in his nightshirt and looking furious. Then half the town, drawn by the promise of drama. They gathered in the boarding house's common room, a space meant for quiet conversation that now felt cramped and tense. Victor looked at Lydia, then at Garrett, and his expression shifted from fury to calculated calm. Lydia, he said, I'm glad you came to your senses. I didn't come to my senses. I came to tell the truth. The truth? That's rich, coming from you. The truth, Lydia repeated, louder this time, is that you're not the man you pretend to be. You're controlling, manipulative. You made me feel like I was losing my mind for wanting basic freedom. Victor's smile didn't waver. That's quite an accusation. It's not an accusation. It's a fact. You dictated who I could talk to, where I could go, what I could wear. You told me I was too sensitive when I objected, too dramatic when I got upset. I was trying to help you, Victor said smoothly. You were young, naive. You needed guidance. I needed a partner, not a jailer. The crowd murmured. Lydia could feel their uncertainty, their willingness to believe Victor over her. She had to push harder. Tell them, she said. Tell them what you said the night I left, when you found out James had given me money. Victor's expression flickered, just for a moment. I don't recall. You said I was worthless, that no one would ever want me except out of pity, that I should be grateful you'd married me at all. I never said that. Yes, you did, and you meant it, because that's what you really think, that I'm something you own, something you can control and discard when it no longer serves you. That's absurd, Victor said, but his voice had an edge now. I came all this way to bring you home because I love you. You don't love me. You love the idea of winning, of not letting me be the one who got away. Victor's mask slipped further. You're being hysterical. No, I'm being honest, and you can't stand it. Enough, the sheriff interrupted. This is getting us nowhere. Mrs. Rowan, you need to come with me. It's Mrs. Hale, Lydia said, and I'm not going anywhere until he admits what he did. What I did? Victor's voice rose. What about what you did? Running away, stealing, marrying another man while still bound to me. Those are crimes, Lydia. So is what you did to me. It just doesn't have a name yet. I never hurt you. I never laid a hand on you. No, you just hurt me in ways that didn't leave marks, in ways I couldn't prove, in ways that made everyone think I was the problem. Victor took a step toward her, and Lydia saw it, the flash of real anger beneath the charm. You are the problem. You've always been the problem. Nothing I did was ever good enough for you. I gave you a home, a position, a life most women would kill for, and you threw it away. Because it wasn't a life, it was a cage. You're so dramatic, always making everything into some grand tragedy, when the reality is you just couldn't handle being a wife. I couldn't handle being your wife, Lydia corrected. There's a difference. Victor's hands clenched. You ungrateful little... He stopped himself, but not before the words had started to come out, not before everyone in the room had heard the venom in his voice. The crowd shifted. Lydia felt it. A subtle change in the air. The sheriff cleared his throat. Mr. Rowan, maybe you should step outside, cool down. I'm perfectly calm, Victor said, but his voice was tight. You don't look calm, Ruth said quietly. She was standing by the stairs, her arms crossed. You look angry. Of course I'm angry. My wife is accusing me of things I didn't do. Did you or did you not tell her she couldn't talk to certain people? Ruth asked. Victor blinked. We discussed who she should associate with, as any husband would. And did you or did you not control where she went? I wanted to know where she was, for her own safety. And the things she wore? I made suggestions. Is that a crime? No, Ruth said, but it paints a picture, one that's starting to make sense. Victor's attention snapped to her. You believe her? After everything I've told you? I'm starting to question what you've told me, Ruth said, because the man standing in front of me right now doesn't look like someone trying to save his marriage. He looks like someone trying to win an argument. This is ridiculous, Victor said. He turned to the sheriff. Are you going to do your job or not? The sheriff looked between Victor and Lydia, clearly uncomfortable. I'm trying to figure out what my job is here. Your job is to enforce the law, and the law says she's my wife. The law also says a man shouldn't mistreat his wife, the sheriff said carefully. I didn't mistreat her. I provided for her, protected her, loved her. Loved her like property, Garrett said. It was the first time he'd spoken since they'd entered the room. Victor turned to him. And you would know about that, wouldn't you? You literally tried to buy a wife. I offered her a choice, Garrett said. You never did. I gave her everything. Everything except freedom. Victor laughed, harsh and bitter. Freedom. Is that what she told you she wanted? Because what she really wanted was James Murphy's money, and when she couldn't get enough of it, she came here looking for more. That's not true, Lydia said. Isn't it? Tell them, Lydia. Tell them how much James gave you. $500? $1,000? How much does it cost to buy your affection these days? The room went silent. Lydia felt every eye on her. James gave me $300, she said quietly, to pay for the stagecoach, for supplies for a new start. He didn't ask for anything in return. He just wanted to help. And you let him, just like you're letting this rancher help you now. That's what you do, isn't it? Find men who are weak enough to fall for your act. Garrett stepped forward, and the sheriff moved to block him. Easy, the sheriff said. But Garrett wasn't looking at the sheriff. He was looking at Victor. She didn't find me, Garrett said. I found her. I placed the advertisement. I offered the arrangement, and the only thing she's taken from me is the loneliness I'd been carrying for 6 years. The words hung in the air. Victor's expression twisted. How touching. The broken rancher and the runaway wife. What a pair you make. Better than you and her ever were, Garrett said. You don't know anything about us. I know she'd rather risk jail than go back to you. That tells me everything I need to know. Victor's composure finally cracked completely. She's my wife. Mine. I have the legal right. Legal right doesn't mean moral right, Ruth interrupted. She stepped forward, her face serious. I've been married 30 years, Mr. Rowan, and I've never once seen my husband look at me the way you're looking at her right now, like she's something to be conquered, not loved. You don't understand. I understand plenty, Ruth said. I understand that I was wrong about her, and maybe wrong about you too. Victor stared at her, his face flushed. Then he turned to the sheriff. I want her arrested, now, for theft, for fraud, for whatever you can charge her with. The sheriff rubbed his jaw. I'm not sure I can do that. Why not? I've shown you the evidence. You've shown me a marriage certificate, but you haven't shown me proof of theft. And as for fraud, the sheriff looked at Lydia. Did you tell Mr. Hale here you were free to marry? No, Lydia said. I told him I'd left my husband. I didn't say it was final. Did you claim to be unmarried? No. The sheriff nodded slowly. Then, technically, you didn't commit fraud. You just made an error in judgment. An error in judgment? Victor's voice rose to nearly a shout. She married another man while still married to me. That's bigamy. Only if she knowingly entered into a false marriage, the sheriff said. But if she believed her first marriage was over, even if it wasn't legally, he trailed off, but the implication was clear. Victor looked around the room, seeing the tide turning against him. This is insane. You're all insane. I have the law on my side. Maybe you do, the sheriff said. But I'm not convinced it's my job to enforce it. Not when the woman in question clearly doesn't want to go with you. She doesn't have a choice. Actually, a new voice said, she might. Everyone turned. The preacher stood in the doorway, his face grave. I've been listening, he said, and I think there might be a way to resolve this that doesn't involve jail or force. How? Lydia asked. An annulment of your marriage to Mr. Rowan. On what grounds? Victor demanded. She has no grounds. Actually, she might, the preacher said. I've done some reading. A marriage can be annulled if it was entered into under false pretenses, or if one party was unable to fulfill their marital duties. I fulfilled every duty, Victor said. Did you? Because it sounds to me like you failed in the most basic duty of all, treating your wife with respect and kindness. Victor's face went red. That's not grounds for annulment. Maybe not on its own, but combined with evidence of coercion, of control, of behavior that made the continuation of the marriage impossible. The preacher looked at Lydia. I think we could make a case. Who would hear this case? Victor asked. There's no judge within 100 miles. No, but there is a circuit judge who comes through here every 3 months. He's due next week. The preacher turned to the sheriff. We could hold a hearing, let both sides present their evidence. Let the judge decide. The sheriff considered this. That seems fair. Fair? Victor laughed. Fair would be enforcing the law as it's written, not bending it to suit some sob story. The law is meant to protect people, the preacher said, not imprison them. She's not imprisoned. She's married. Are those different things? Ruth asked quietly. Victor stared at her, speechless. The sheriff cleared his throat. Here's what's going to happen. Mrs. Rowan, or Mrs. Hale, whichever she prefers, is going to stay here, in town, until the judge arrives. She won't be arrested. She won't be forced to leave. She'll just wait. And me? Victor demanded. You're welcome to wait too, or you can go back east and return when the judge gets here. Your choice. Victor looked around the room at the faces that had shifted from sympathy to suspicion. At Lydia, standing straight and defiant. At Garrett, whose hand rested lightly on his knife. Fine, Victor said finally. We'll wait for the judge, but when he rules in my favor, and he will, I expect everyone here to remember that I tried to do this the easy way. He turned and walked out, his footsteps heavy on the wooden floor. The room let out a collective breath. Lydia's legs felt weak. She sat down hard on the nearest chair. Garrett moved to her side. You all right? I don't know. Maybe. She looked up at him. Did that really just happen? I think so. Ruth approached, her expression sheepish. I owe you an apology. You don't? I do. I made assumptions. About you. About what kind of person you were. I was wrong. Thank you, Lydia said. Ruth nodded and moved away. The crowd began to disperse, people filing out with murmured conversations. Clara paused on her way past. That took guts, she said to Lydia. Or stupidity, Lydia replied. Maybe both. Clara almost smiled. Either way, I respect it. When the room was finally empty except for Lydia, Garrett, and the preacher, Lydia allowed herself to slump. What happens now? She asked. Now we wait, the preacher said, and we hope the judge is a reasonable man. And if he's not? The preacher's expression was kind but honest. Then we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. He left them alone. Garrett sat down beside Lydia. They didn't speak for a long time. Finally, Lydia said, Thank you. For what? For not giving up on me, even when you should have. I don't give up easy, Garrett said. You should probably know that about me. I'm starting to figure that out. They sat in the quiet boarding house. Two people who'd found each other by accident and were choosing each other by design and waited for whatever came next. The week that followed felt longer than all the weeks before it combined. Lydia stayed at the boarding house, though this time her door remained unlocked. Ruth had softened considerably after the confrontation, even going so far as to bring Lydia tea in the mornings and ask if she needed anything. It was strange being cared for by someone who'd been so quick to condemn her just days before. But Lydia was learning that people were complicated. They could be wrong and still find their way to right. Garrett came by every day. Sometimes he brought things, fresh eggs from the ranch, a book he thought she might like, wildflowers he'd picked on the ride into town. Sometimes he just sat with her in the boarding house parlor, not saying much, just being present. Lydia found she didn't mind the silence anymore. With Garrett, quiet didn't feel empty. It felt full of things that didn't need words. Victor stayed at the saloon, keeping to himself mostly. But Lydia would see him sometimes, watching from across the street. Not threatening, just watching. Like he was waiting for her to crack, to come back to him on her own. She never did. On the third day, Margaret Brennan showed up at the boarding house. Lydia was surprised to see her. They'd never spoken directly, only that one tense encounter at the ranch. Can we talk? Margaret asked. They sat in the small garden behind the boarding house, away from prying eyes and ears. "I owe you an apology," Margaret said without preamble. "I accused you of being trouble before I knew anything about you. That wasn't fair." "You were protecting your interests," Lydia said. "I understand that. Understanding it doesn't make it right." Margaret pulled at a loose thread on her sleeve. "I lost my husband 3 years ago. Wagon accident. Simple, stupid thing that took him from me in an instant. After that, everyone expected me to sell the ranch, to go back east, to family, to let some man take over what we'd built together. But you didn't." "No. I stayed. I fought. I made myself harder than I'd ever wanted to be, because that's what it took to survive out here." Margaret looked at Lydia. "And somewhere along the way, I started seeing every woman as either weak or competition. I forgot there were other options." "What changed your mind?" Lydia asked. "Watching you face down your husband in front of the whole town. That took strength. The kind I recognize." Margaret smiled slightly. "The kind I respect." "I was terrified the entire time." "That's usually when real strength shows up. When you're terrified and you do it anyway." Margaret stood. "If you need anything, if that judge rules against you and you need help getting away, you come find me. Understood?" Lydia nodded, her throat tight. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. Just remember you're not as alone as you think you are." Margaret left, and Lydia sat in the garden for a long time after, thinking about strength and fear and the strange ways people found their way to kindness. That evening, Garrett brought news. He'd been asking around, quietly investigating the cut fence and missing cattle. He'd found something. "It wasn't anyone from town," he said. They were sitting on the boarding house porch, watching the sunset. "There's a group of drifters that's been working their way through the territory. They hit the Morrison Ranch 2 weeks ago, took a dozen head of cattle." "So it was just bad luck? Bad timing?" "Looks that way. Sheriff's going after them tomorrow." Garrett leaned back against the post. "Which means the town can stop blaming you for that, at least." "Will they stop blaming me for everything else?" "Some will, some won't. People are stubborn about their opinions." He looked at her. "Does it matter?" Lydia considered. A month ago she would have said yes. She would have cared desperately what these people thought of her, would have twisted herself into knots trying to win their approval. "No," she said now. "I don't think it does." Garrett nodded like she'd said something profound. The judge arrived on a Tuesday, 6 days after Victor had shown up and turned everything upside down. His name was Howard Blackwell, and he was older than Lydia expected, with white hair and eyes that looked like they'd seen everything twice. The hearing was held in the church, the only building large enough to hold everyone who wanted to attend. And everyone did want to attend. This was the most excitement Caldwell Flats had seen in years. Lydia sat at the front with Garrett beside her. Victor sat across the aisle with a lawyer he'd hired from the next town over, a slick-looking man with papers in a leather case. Judge Blackwell called the room to order. "This is an unusual situation," he began. "We have a woman legally married to one man, who then married another man believing her first marriage was effectively over. The first husband wants her back. The second husband wants her to stay. And the woman herself is asking for an annulment of the first marriage." He looked at Lydia. "Is that an accurate summary, Mrs. Rowan?" "It's Mrs. Hale," Lydia said. "And yes, that's accurate." "Very well. Mr. Rowan, you'll present your case first." Victor's lawyer stood. He was good at his job. Lydia had to give him that. He laid out the facts cleanly. The marriage certificate, the dates, the lack of legal dissolution. He painted Lydia as a woman who'd run away from her responsibilities, who'd stolen money and abandoned her vows. "My client has every legal right to have his wife returned to him," the lawyer concluded. "The second marriage is invalid. Mrs. Rowan belongs with her lawful husband." Judge Blackwell made a note. "Mrs. Hale, do you have representation?" "No, Your Honor," Lydia said, "just myself." "Then speak for yourself." Lydia stood. Her hands were shaking, but her voice was steady. "Everything Mr. Rowan's lawyer said is technically true. I did leave. I did take money, though it was given to me freely by someone who wanted to help. And I did marry Garrett Hale without finalizing the end of my first marriage." She paused. "But what's also true is that my marriage to Victor Rowan was not a partnership. It was a prison. He controlled where I went, who I spoke to, what I wore. He told me I was too sensitive when I objected. Too dramatic when I got upset. He made me feel like I was losing my mind for wanting basic freedom. Those are serious accusations, the judge said. Can you prove them?
No, Your Honor. He was careful never to leave marks, never to do anything that would look wrong from the outside. That's what made it so effective. So we're supposed to take your word for it? Victor's lawyer interjected. You're supposed to look at the evidence of who I am and what I've done, Lydia said. I'm not a thief. I'm not a liar. I'm a woman who made a desperate choice to escape something unbearable, and I'd make that choice again. The judge leaned forward. Why didn't you seek a divorce through proper channels? I tried, Your Honor. I consulted a lawyer back east. He told me I had no grounds, that unless I could prove physical violence or infidelity, no judge would grant me a divorce, that the process would take years and require me to stay within Victor's reach the entire time. Lydia met the judge's eyes. I couldn't do that, so I ran, and married the first man who offered you an alternative. Not the first man, the right man. Lydia looked at Garrett. Garrett Hale offered me a choice, not a cage, not control. Just an honest arrangement between two people who needed something from each other. And what started as an arrangement became something more, became a partnership, became a marriage in every way that matters. Touching, Victor's lawyer said, but legally meaningless. Is it? The preacher stood. Your Honor, if I may speak. Go ahead. I've been thinking about this situation a great deal, and it seems to me that we have two marriages here, one that exists on paper but is dead in every meaningful way, and one that may not be legal but is alive and thriving. The question isn't which marriage is real in the eyes of the law, it's which marriage we should protect. The law doesn't work that way, Victor's lawyer said. Maybe it should, the preacher replied. Judge Blackwell held up a hand. I appreciate the philosophical discussion, but I need to deal with the law as it exists. Mr. Rowan, I'd like to hear from you directly. Not your lawyer. You. Victor stood, smoothing his jacket. Your Honor, I love my wife. I made mistakes. What husband doesn't? But I never stopped loving her. I came all this way because I want her back. Because our marriage deserves another chance. Do you acknowledge that you controlled aspects of her life? The judge asked. I provided guidance. She was young, inexperienced. That's not what I asked. Did you or did you not dictate who she could speak with? Victor's jaw tightened. I expressed preferences about her associations, for her own good. Did you or did you not require her to tell you where she was going at all times? I wanted to keep her safe. Did you or did you not criticize her choices in clothing and behavior? I offered constructive feedback. Constructive feedback, the judge repeated. Is that what you call it? Yes, Victor said. I was trying to help her become the woman she was capable of being. And what woman was that? One who understood her duties, her place, her role as my wife. The room went very quiet. The judge leaned back in his chair. Mr. Rowan, I've been married for 42 years, and in all that time, I've never once told my wife what her place was. Do you know why? Because she's not a servant. She's not a child. She's my partner, my equal, and treating her as anything less would be an insult to everything marriage is supposed to be. Victor's face flushed. With respect, Your Honor, your marriage is your business. Mine is mine. Not when you're asking me to force a woman back into a situation she clearly doesn't want, the judge said. Mrs. Hale, you said you consulted a lawyer about divorce. Do you remember his name? Charles Whitmore, Your Honor. In Philadelphia. The judge made a note. I'll write to him. Verify your account. In the meantime, I'm going to adjourn this hearing for 2 days while I review the case law and consider my options. Your Honor, Victor's lawyer started. 2 days, the judge repeated. That's my decision. The room erupted in murmurs. The judge banged his gavel, and everyone filed out, buzzing with speculation. Outside, Garrett pulled Lydia aside. How are you feeling? He asked. Like I might throw up, Lydia admitted. That's normal. Is it? How would you know? Because that's how I felt at our wedding, Garrett said. Despite everything, Lydia laughed. The next 2 days crawled by. Lydia tried to keep busy, but there was only so much cleaning and mending and pacing a person could do. Ruth noticed and started giving her tasks, help with the laundry,
assistants preparing meals, anything to keep her hands occupied and her mind from spinning. On the second evening, Garrett brought her to the ranch. She hadn't been back since Victor arrived, and the sight of it made her chest ache. "I miss this place," she said. "It missed you too," Garrett said. "Hasn't felt right without you here." They sat on the porch as the sun set, the same way they had that first week, before everything got complicated, before Victor, before the hearing. "What happens if the judge rules against me?" Lydia asked. "Then we leave, like we planned, and give up everything you've built." "I told you before, it's just land, just a house." "It's more than that, and you know it." Garrett was quiet for a moment. "Yeah, it is. But you're more important." "Why?" Lydia asked. "Why am I more important than 6 years of your life?" "Because those 6 years were about running away from something, from grief, from guilt, from feeling like I'd failed Catherine." Garrett looked at her. "But this is about running toward something, toward a life that actually matters, toward someone who sees me as I am and doesn't look away." Lydia felt tears prick her eyes. "I'm broken, Garrett. Damaged. I come with so much mess." "So do I. Maybe that's why this works. We're both broken. But together we're a little less broken than we were alone." It wasn't a romantic declaration. It wasn't poetry. It was honest and real and more meaningful than any grand gesture could have been. "If the judge rules in our favor," Lydia said, "and Victor is gone, and we can actually build a life here, what do you want that life to look like?" Garrett considered. "I want mornings where we drink coffee together before the work starts. I want evenings where we sit on this porch and watch the sunset. I want to know that when I come home, someone will be here who actually wants me to be there." "That's it? That's all you want?" "That's everything," Garrett said. "What about you?" "I want to stop being afraid," Lydia said. "I want to wake up and not wonder if today's the day everything falls apart. I want to feel like I have a right to be happy, like I deserve it." "You do deserve it." "Do I? I'm not so sure." "I am," Garrett said, "and eventually you will be too." They sat in the gathering dark, and Lydia let herself imagine it. A life here. A real life. Not one she was constantly running from or toward. Just a life. Simple. Honest. Hers. The third day arrived. The hearing reconvened. Judge Blackwell looked more serious than before, if that was possible. "I've reviewed the case law," he began, "and I've received a response from Mr. Whitmore, the lawyer Mrs. Hale consulted in Philadelphia. He confirms her account. She did seek legal advice about divorce and was told she had no grounds under Pennsylvania law." Victor shifted in his seat. "I've also considered the testimony from both parties, and I've come to a decision." The room held its breath. "Mr. Rowan, you have every legal right to your wife as marriage law currently stands. The marriage certificate is valid. There was no legal dissolution. By every technical measure, Mrs. Rowan is still your wife." Lydia felt her heart sink. "However," the judge continued, "I'm not convinced that enforcing this legal right serves justice. The testimony suggests a pattern of control and manipulation that, while not meeting the legal definition of abuse, nevertheless constitutes behavior inconsistent with the spirit of marriage." Victor's lawyer stood. "Your Honor, feelings and spirits don't override law, see." "Sit down," the judge said. "I'm not finished." The lawyer sat. "The law is meant to serve people, not imprison them. And while I cannot grant a formal annulment, Mrs. Hale lacks the legal grounds for that. I can decline to enforce Mr. Rowan's claim, which is what I'm going to do." "You can't do that," Victor said, standing. "I can and I am. Mrs. Hale will remain here in Caldwell Flats. You, Mr. Rowan, will return east. If you wish to pursue this matter further, you may do so through the proper legal channels. But you will not take this woman by force. You will not have her arrested. You will leave her in peace." "This is outrageous. This is my courtroom and my decision. And if you continue to argue with me, I'll hold you in contempt." The judge's eyes were hard. "Do you understand?" Victor's hands clenched into fists. But he nodded. "As for the second marriage," the judge continued, "while it may not be legally valid given the circumstances, I'm not going to prosecute it. Mrs. Hale acted in good faith, believing her first marriage was over. Mr. Hale did the same. No harm was intended, no crime was committed beyond a technicality." He looked at Lydia and Garrett. You'll need to wait until the first marriage is properly dissolved before your second marriage can be legally recognized. I recommend you petition for divorce in Pennsylvania. Given what I've heard here, I believe you'll have grounds based on Mr. Rowan's behavior, though it may take time." "How much time?" Lydia asked. "Could be months, could be years."
"The law moves slowly." The judge's expression softened slightly. "But in the meantime, I see no reason why you can't live your lives as you see fit. Just understand that legally, you're not married. Not yet." It wasn't perfect. It wasn't a clean resolution. But it was enough. "Thank you, Your Honor," Lydia said. The judge nodded. "Good luck to you both. You're going to need it." Victor stood abruptly and walked out without a word. His lawyer gathered his papers and followed. The crowd erupted in conversation, some approving, some scandalized. But Lydia didn't hear any of it. She turned to Garrett, and he was already looking at her. "So," he said, "what now?" "Now we go home," Lydia said, "and we start over. For real this time." They left the church together, walking past the whispers and stares, and headed toward the wagon. Clara caught up with them before they could leave. "That took courage," she said to Lydia. "I meant what I said before. I respect that." "Thank you," Lydia said. "And for what it's worth," Clara added, looking at Garrett, "I think you two are good together, even if it's not exactly legal yet." Sarah appeared beside her sister, looking uncomfortable. "I'm sorry," she said quietly, "for what I said at the wedding, for trying to stop it. That wasn't fair." "You were hurt," Lydia said. "I understand. Still, it wasn't my place." Sarah managed a small smile. "I hope you'll be happy here." "I hope so too," Lydia said. The sisters walked away, and Lydia and Garrett climbed into the wagon. The ride back to the ranch was quiet but comfortable. When they arrived, Lydia stood in the doorway and looked at the house that had become hers over the past few weeks. It wasn't much. The floors creaked, the windows stuck, the stove temperamental, but it was home in a way nowhere else had ever been. "You all right?" Garrett asked. "Yeah," Lydia said. "I think I actually am." That night, they ate dinner together. Stew Lydia had made that morning before the hearing, thick with vegetables from the garden and beef from the cattle that had been recovered. They talked about small things, what needed fixing around the ranch, whether they should plant more corn next season, if the mare was favoring her left front leg. Normal things, domestic things, the kind of things married people talked about, except they weren't married. Not legally, not yet, maybe not for years. But sitting there across from Garrett, watching him eat the food she'd made in the house they shared, Lydia realized something. The piece of paper didn't matter. The legal recognition didn't matter. What mattered was the choice they'd both made to be here, together, building something neither of them had thought they'd have again. Trust. Partnership. Home. Later, after the dishes were washed and the lamps dimmed, they sat on the porch one more time. "You think Victor will actually leave us alone?" Lydia asked. "I don't know," Garrett admitted, "but I think the judge made it clear there would be consequences if he doesn't. And Victor strikes me as someone who doesn't like losing. He might decide it's better to let this go than to keep fighting a battle he can't win." "I hope you're right. Even if I'm not, we'll handle it. Together." Lydia leaned her head against Garrett's shoulder. He stiffened for just a moment, still not entirely used to being touched, then relaxed and put his arm around her. "Thank you," Lydia said, "for all of this, for defending me, for not giving up." "You don't need to thank me." "Yes, I do. Not everyone would have done what you did." "Not everyone had a reason to," Garrett said. "I did." They sat like that until the stars came out, until the night grew cold enough that they had to go inside. And for the first time in longer than Lydia could remember, she felt safe. The weeks turned into months. Victor never came back. The divorce petition was filed, though progress was slow and complicated by distance and lawyers who had better things to do. But Lydia didn't mind the wait. She was in no hurry. The town gradually accepted her presence. Some people remained cold, but most softened. Ruth became a genuine friend. Margaret invited them to dinner at her ranch. Even Henry at the dry goods store started greeting Lydia by name instead of with suspicion. The ranch prospered. Garrett hired 2 ranch hands to help with the work, and Lydia started a small garden that grew larger every season. She learned to can vegetables, to mend harnesses, to deliver a calf when the hands weren't available. She learned to ride properly,
to shoot, to handle herself in ways she'd never imagined back east. She learned to be strong, not the kind of strength that came from hardening yourself against the world, but the kind that came from allowing yourself to be vulnerable with someone you trusted. And she learned that Garrett had been right about something. She did deserve to be happy. It just took time to believe it. 2 years after she'd first stepped off the stagecoach, 2 years after she'd married a stranger in a ceremony no one approved of, Lydia stood on the porch of the ranch and watched the sun rise. Garrett came up behind her, carrying a cup of coffee. Their daughter, barely 3 months old and named Catherine after the woman Garrett had lost, was asleep against his chest in a sling Lydia had sewn. "Morning," he said, handing her the coffee. "Morning," Lydia replied. They stood there in comfortable silence, watching the light spread across the land they'd built a life on. The divorce had finally come through 6 months ago. They'd gotten married again, properly this time, legally this time, in the same church where they'd first said their vows. The preacher had smiled through the whole ceremony. Clara and Sarah had come, Ruth had cried. Margaret had brought a bottle of whiskey and insisted they all toast to new beginnings. It had been perfect in its imperfection, just like everything else they'd built together. "What are you thinking about?" Garrett asked. "How far we've come," Lydia said. "How different everything is from what I imagined." "Better or worse?" "Better. Definitely better." Catherine stirred against Garrett's chest, making small noises. He swayed gently and she settled again. "You're good at that," Lydia said. "Had practice with calves," Garrett replied. "Not that different." Lydia laughed. "Don't let your daughter hear you say that." "Our daughter," Garrett corrected, "and she won't remember." "Our daughter." The words still made Lydia's chest feel full. She'd never imagined this. When she'd boarded that stagecoach, desperate and alone, she'd been hoping for safety, for a place to hide, for a chance to start over. She'd found all of that, but she'd also found something more. She'd found a partner who saw her clearly and didn't look away, who stood beside her when it would have been easier to step back, who chose her every day, even when the choice was hard. And in choosing him back, in building this life together, she'd found the thing she'd been searching for without even knowing it. Herself. Not the version of herself that Victor had tried to mold her into. Not the scared woman who'd run away in the night. But someone new. Someone stronger. Someone who could face the world and not flinch. The most feared man in town, the one people had whispered about, the one they'd called cold and distant, had turned out to be the kindest person Lydia had ever known. He just showed his kindness in quiet ways, in daily gestures, in steady presence, in choosing to stay when leaving would have been simpler. And the woman no one had wanted in Caldwell Flats, the outsider who'd been judged before she'd even arrived, had become exactly what the town needed. A reminder that people were more than their worst moments, that everyone deserved a second chance, that sometimes the right choice looked wrong from the outside. Together, they'd proven that a marriage built on honesty and respect mattered more than one built on law and tradition. That love could grow in unexpected places between unlikely people. That home wasn't something you were born into, but something you built, piece by piece, choice by choice, day by day. It hadn't been easy. There were still hard days. Days when the past crept in. Days when old fears surfaced. Days when the weight of everything felt too heavy. But they faced those days together, and that made all the difference. Catherine stirred again, this time waking fully. Her eyes opened, the same dark color as Garrett's, and she looked around with the wide, unfocused gaze of the very young. Garrett kissed the top of her head. "Good morning, little one." Lydia reached out and touched her daughter's soft cheek, marveling at the fact that this tiny person existed, that she and Garrett had created her, that their broken pieces had somehow come together to make something whole and perfect and new. "I love you," Lydia said. She was looking at Catherine, but she meant it for both of them. Garrett met her eyes over their daughter's head. "I love you too." Simple words, said quietly, without fanfare. But they carried the weight of everything they'd been through, everything they'd overcome, everything they'd built. The sun continued to rise, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. The ranch spread out before them, the barn, the pastures, the cattle grazing in the distance, their land, their life, their choice. And somewhere, in some town she'd never returned to, Victor was living his life without her. Maybe he'd found someone else to control. Maybe he'd learned something from losing her. Maybe he was still angry, still bitter, still convinced he'd been wronged. Lydia didn't know, and she found she didn't care. That chapter was closed. This one, the one she was living right now with Garrett and Catherine and the life they'd chosen, this was the only story that mattered. She thought about the girl she'd been 2 years ago, desperate, scared, alone. If she could go back and tell that girl what was waiting for her, she wouldn't believe it. The idea that pain could lead to healing, that running could lead to finding, that losing everything could mean gaining what truly mattered, it would have seemed impossible. But standing here now, with the morning sun on her face and her family beside her, Lydia understood something fundamental about life. The hard things, the painful, terrifying, seemingly impossible things, those were often the doorways to the best things. You just had to be brave enough to walk through them, to keep going when every instinct said to stop, to choose hope when fear seemed more logical. She'd done that. They'd both done that. And look what they'd found on the other side. Not perfection, not a fairy tale ending where everything was always easy and nothing ever hurt, but something real, something earned, something worth fighting for. A life built not on what the world said they should be, but on who they actually were. Broken, flawed, human, but trying, always trying, together. And in the end, that was enough, more than enough. It was everything.